Hi everyone, my name is Eliza, and today we're going to be discussing the effects of chronic stress on the digestive system. So let's start with an introduction. We're going to be talking about the organs and the functions of these organs, as well as how the digestive system is connected to other systems in the body, such as the circulatory system, as well as the muscular system. So the oral cavity is the start of the digestive system. It breaks down food into smaller parts, and this is known as mastication. Saliva from the salivary glands will moisten the food. The food is made into a bolus, which is known as a mass of food, in which the tongue will move it down the esophagus by swallowing. Once the esophagus receives the food, peristalsis, which is muscular contractions, will move the food towards the stomach. Because of swallowing and pressure within the esophagus, the gastroesophageal sphincter will open. This will allow the bolus, that mass of food, to enter the stomach. The stomach will keep the food while being mixed with enzymes, and the function of the stomach is to secrete gastric juices for digestion. The stomach has a high acidic environment, a pH of relative to 2, to break down food. Once the food is broken down, it will be released into the small intestine. So here's a picture of the oral cavity, the esophagus, as well as the stomach for reference. And here you can see the esophagus and where the tongue will push down food into the stomach, and the stomach will keep that food while being mixed with enzymes. So here I just wanted to show you this photo. This is the oral cavity. The salivary glands, like we talked about, will moisten the food. The esophagus will transport that food into the stomach. And now we're going to be talking about the small intestine and the large intestine. So the small intestine is divided into three parts known as the duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. The function of the small intestine is to break down food using enzymes from the pancreas and liver. The pancreas and liver are accessory organs, which we will be discussing later. Peristalsis, remember we were talking about those muscular contractions? They will move and mix the food with these enzymes. The large intestine also has three parts, known as the cecum, the colon, and the rectum. The function of the large intestine is to absorb water and process waste material into a bowel movement. The rectum and anus is at the end of the large intestine. The rectum will store feces until defecation, and the anus is the exit point for waste. Sphincters between the anus and rectum will control elimination, and hence the bowel movement. Again, let's go back to this photo. We just talked about the small intestine right here, the anus and the rectum and the large intestine. Now we're going to be talking about the pancreas, the liver. So the liver digests foods and detoxifies blood. It produces bile, digestive juice, and that's important as it breaks down fatty parts of food. Once vitamins are processed and plasma proteins are synthesized, the pancreas can function to secrete digestive juices. It neutralizes acidic chyme. Remember we were talking about how the stomach is super acidic? Well, the pancreas will neutralize the acid. It contains enzymes for digestion and protein. The gallbladder stores bile and concentrates bile salts. Bile is secreted from the gallbladder into the duodenum. So I want to point out to you how the digestive system is connected to other systems in the body. It works with the circulatory system, which the blood will take nutrients from the food that has been broken down in the digestive system, and it is responsible for transporting it to other places. The muscular system is in charge of those muscles that are pushing that food that is broken down through the digestive system organs. Remember we were talking about peristalsis, those muscular contractions? Well, the digestive system is working hand in hand with these two systems, and it is responsible for providing nutrients to the body and to all the systems. Without the digestive system, our body wouldn't be able to function. So those muscles are pushing food down the esophagus, the stomach, and the intestines. So let's talk about the epigenetic mechanism in irritable bowel syndrome. What is irritable bowel syndrome, you may ask? Well, IBS is a brain-gut axis disorder that includes symptoms like chronic abdominal pain and altered bowel habits. We're going to be discussing IBS-D patients and their symptoms. And so it's important to note that IBS is a stress-sensitive disorder. Genetic and shared environmental factors are evidence for familial clustering. So the physiological level consequences of chronic stress on the digestive system. Chronic stress has been known to be an environmental trigger for irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, in people. So we know that stress is a reaction to psychological or physical provocation, and stress disturbs the body's homeostasis. When the body is not able to return to homeostasis, there are prolonged effects, and that can lead to diseases and exacerbation of symptoms. So stress has effects on the gut's physiology, including gut barrier function, as well as diarrhea predominant IBS-D patients. So we're going to be talking about how that chronic stress can lead to changes in permeability and visceral perception, and that chronic stress and early life stressors within a patient's past, they are a mechanism that changes glucocorticoid receptor expression. So here I wanted to point out that IBS is subdivided into diarrhea predominant, which is known as IBS-D, constipation predominant, which is IBS-C, and also a mix of diarrhea and constipation, which is known as IBS-M. So for the presentation purposes, we're going to be talking about IBS-D patients, and a symptom that IBS-D patients have is diarrhea. And this is because food is moving too quickly throughout the bowel, and this is causing watery stool. So elevated glucocorticoids and its effects on the digestive system. So glucocorticoids such as cortisol and corticosterone bind to receptors and are in charge of regulating physiological adaptations to chronic stress. When there are elevated glucocorticoids, the homeostasis is disturbed. Remember, I was talking about how your body is not able to return to homeostasis? Well, that will lead to negative effects like in visceral hypersensitivity and diarrhea. So stress-induced visceral hypersensitivity. Visceral hypersensitivity is intense pain of the inner organs. So chronic abdominal pain is found in IBS patients. So chronic abdominal pain leads IBS patients to have high reactivity to stress because of an increased visceral perception as well as gut motility. Barrier dysfunction also contributes to increased visceral perception and increased intestinal permeability in IBS-D patients. To your right, I have shown an image where it shows that irritable bowel syndrome is a gut-brain axis disorder. So the gut and the brain are connected, and also early life stress is impacting that connection. Visceral pain and altered motility are listed as effects of that. So let's talk about the molecular mechanism underlying IBS-D patients and their symptoms, which include diarrhea. So why is stress-induced visceral hypersensitivity occurring? Well, the gut-brain interaction. I want to show you this image where the gut-brain axis is here, and that's the connection between the brain and the gut, and stress is having an effect on that brain, and the brain is sending signals to the gut, to cells within the gut. So once those neurons initiate signals from the brain, when it's compromised, it can affect the HPA axis response. And so stress-induced activation of the HPA axis system is connected to increased visceral hypersensitivity. And so remember we were talking about those glucocorticoids such as cortisol and corticosterone? They are molecules of the HPA axis, and they bind to receptors and regulate physiological adaptations to chronic stress. And when that is compromised, stress-induced visceral hypersensitivity can occur. And so why is diarrhea happening? Why is that a symptom of IBS-D patients? Well, the inflammatory responses in the early lives of patients increases the responses to the stimulus. within the colon, and this is known as vasoactive intestinal peptide. This is why diarrhea symptoms are exhibiting from IBSD patients. This is one contribution. And we already talked about the signals that are coming directly from the brain and they're acting upon the cells within the gut. And that is a part of the enteric nervous system. And it's contributing to an increase of intestinal permeability. So leaky gut has a big influence on why diarrhea is occurring. So here on the left, you can see a normal gut, this healthy gut, and that's normal tight junction. On the right, inflammation is occurring between these tight junctions, and that's what's leading to diarrhea. So disorders of the gut-brain interactions, we were talking about the signals coming from the brain to the cells of the gut. They're leading to visceral hypersensitivity, so an increased pain sensation, and altered gut microbiota. Short-chain fatty acids are really important to gut health, and when they infect the inflammatory response in the gut microbiome axis, that can lead to inflammation and diarrhea. So as inflammation increases, there's more water present within the intestines, the small and the large intestines, and that is what is happening. And that is what is leading to diarrhea happening in IBSD patients. So now that we've covered what the digestive system is, as well as what are the physiological effects of chronic stress, we also talked about the molecular consequences of the digestive system. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. Here's my APA citation as well as my OpenStax textbook as reference.